Today's reading is of the screenplay Invaders from Mars. I'm reading a draft from 1950, written by John Tucker Battle. This version was then revised by Richard Blake before it was filmed. Music of Finlandia type behind credits builds to crescendo on. Fade in. Pan shot, special effects, night. Of star-studded heavens at night. Scattered cumulus clouds alternately obscure and disclose a three-quarter moon and vast open deeps of glittering constellations. The music diminishes and backs the voice of the narrator. Narrator. Since the beginning of time, the people of our earth have looked upon the stars and pondered. They wondered what manner of man or creature inhabited the faint, mysterious worlds that lay beyond. Exterior, Mount Wilson Observatory, night. Long shot. Large telescope pivoting against the sky. Interior, telescope room, night. Medium shot. Two astronomers adjusting eyepieces. Narrator. But the largest telescopes have failed to penetrate the dark and awesome secret. Interior, telescope room, different observatory, night. Close shot. White-haired astronomer peering into the eyepiece of a telescope. Narrator. Men still probe the deeps of space, men of all ages, seeking the answer. Interior, David McLean's bedroom, night. Close shot. Of telescope. Dolly back to disclose David McLean, a 12-year-old boy who is sitting on the floor with his eyes glued to a telescope. He is dressed in rumpled pajamas. A student lamp on the floor lights the scene in low key. A star map and nautical almanac lay on the floor in high key under the lamp. A small cairn terrier named Cricket stares up at him with wistful curiosity. Interior, David's bedroom, night. Medium shot. As David moves back from the telescope and rubs his eyes with his knuckles. He leafs through the nautical almanac and reaches for the aluminum canteen on the windowsill. It falls to the floor with a clatter. He picks it up quickly and listens apprehensively for an indication that he has awakened his parents. Sighs with relief and glances at an alarm clock on the windowsill, which reads 3:40. He unscrews the canteen stopper and tilts it to drink, then stops as a bright light illuminates the darkness outside the window. Interior, David's bedroom, night. Full shot, special effects. David's angle, through the window of a swiftly descending ball of brilliant white fire, as it sweeps down out of the heavens, hovers for a moment, then drops behind foreground trees. Interior, David's bedroom, night, close shot. David, his face highlighted by the ball of fire as he stares with incredible bewilderment. David, with awe. Well, gee whiz. Interior, David's bedroom, night, medium shot. David crosses to foot of bed, puts on his bathrobe and slippers, climbs through the window, chirping at the dog, Cricket, who hops up on the windowsill and follows him out. Exterior, back of McLean's house, field in background, night, medium shot. As David turns and looks at the dog, who growls and trots toward the field. David follows him toward field, but stops suddenly. Exterior, McLean field, shooting away from house, night. Special effects. David sees a brilliant white light glow suddenly in the distance. It casts a gigantic black shadow of a thing that could be a man against the flank of a dark hill. The light goes out suddenly, and a strange humming sound fills the air. Exterior, back of McLean's house, night. Reverse medium shot. David reacts with amazement to what he has seen. He turns and runs toward house, followed by Cricket. Interior, David's room, shooting toward field, night. As the dog jumps through the window, followed by David, who grabs the flashlight. Camera pans with David as he exits into the hall. Interior, Mr. and Mrs. McLean's bedroom. Low key, night, medium shot. David bursts through the door and shines the flashlight on the bed, and his father and mother sit up. McLean fumbles for the table light and shades his eyes against the flashlight. He turns on the light. Mrs. McLean, with concern. "What's the matter, David? Are you all right?" David, excitedly. "Dad, listen. I saw something just landed in our field. A flying saucer or something." Mrs. McLean. "A what?" David. "A spaceship, I think. It's there now, over by the hill. Come on, Dad." McLean, with weary exasperation. "Have you gone completely crazy? 4 o'clock in the morning?" David. "But Dad, I saw it, I tell you." Mrs. McLean. "Oh, you had a dream, dear. A nightmare." David. "I wasn't asleep. I saw it. It landed in our field." McLean, putting his feet on the floor. "Now that's enough." David. "But Dad." McLean. "All right, march." David, leaving, followed by Cricket. "Aw, gee." He slams door. McLean gets up and puts on his slippers. Mrs. McLean. "Oh, John, don't scold him. He didn't mean to slam the door." McLean, walking towards door and yawning. "I'm not. I'm just going to see that he goes to bed." Interior, David's room, night. Full shot. He is standing by the window, staring out. Cricket has his forepaws on the windowsill. The door opens. David turns and looks at his father guiltily as he closes the door. McLean indicates the bed with his thumb. With a sigh, David shucks off his bathrobe and slippers and crawls into the bed. Cricket jumps onto the foot of the bed. McLean crosses to a wardrobe chest and selects a medicine bottle and a spoon from the top of it. He returns and sits on the side of the bed. David. "I'm not sick." McLean shakes bottle and pours into spoon. "I know. This is some of that stuff Dr. Weber left to make you sleep when you had the flu. Come on, open up." David looks at his father with exasperated patience and with a shrug of martyrdom swallows the medicine and drops back on his pillow. McLean, gently. "Now what makes you think you saw a flying saucer?" David, rising on elbows, trying to convince him. "I don't think, Dad. I know. McLean, with a smile, pushes him back on the pillow. McLean. "Maybe it was one of the experimental rockets from over at White Sands." David shakes his head. "If anything had fallen in the field, I'd have heard it, wouldn't I?" David. "It didn't fall, Dad. It landed over in the field." "Blossom. Gee, Dad, Blossom's out there. We'd better go get her." McLean regards the boy with a patient, affectionate smile. McLean, with a smile. "Blossom is an intelligent cow. She can take care of herself." David. "But Dad..." McLean. "You've been reading too many of those science stories. Flying saucers." David, yawning. "But I saw it, and Cricket saw it. He growled." McLean, fondling the dog. "He growls at hoot owls too, and shadows, and I want you to stop growling at shadows and go to sleep." David stares at him with patient resignation. McLean. "Tomorrow morning I'll take my 12 gauge and you take your 410 and you and I and Cricket will go out in that field, and if there's any spaceship or flying saucer out there, we'll take a shot at it. Especially if they've bothered our cow." David, feeling the effects of the sedative, yawns again. His father runs his fingers lightly through David's hair in a soothing fashion. McLean, gently, "That's a good boy. Go to sleep." David's eyes close and McLean gets up softly, tiptoes to the light switch, and turns out the light. Slow dissolve to exterior, McLean field, night. Long shot. Nothing is moving. The bellow of a cow is heard overseen. Interior, Mr. and Mrs. McLean's bedroom, night. Medium shot. Very low key. Moonlight through bedroom window. Mrs. McLean's voice comes overseen with alarmed insistence. Mrs. McLean, "John, John?" McLean, annoyed and sleepy, "Now what's the matter?" Off-scene is heard the low, mournful bellowing of a cow. The light goes on, revealing McLean irritably rubbing his eyes. Mrs. McLean, "The cow! Something's wrong with her." The cow's mooing rises to a terrified bellowing. McLean, "Probably caught in the fence." He gets up, puts on his shoes and bathrobe, and takes a flashlight. Mrs. McLean, "Hurry, she may be hurt." As McLean exits, wipe to exterior, McLean field, night, medium shot. McLean enters carrying lighted flashlight. He walks toward sound of bellowing and disappears behind bushes. Bellowing suddenly stops. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior, McLean field, morning. Long shot. McLean house in background. David and Cricket, in foreground, are walking hesitantly into the field. There is a sudden high-frequency hum, and both David and the dog stare at the ground, which trembles slightly. David turns and runs toward the house, followed by Cricket. Dissolve to exterior, front of McLean house, morning, medium shot. A police car stands in front of the house, and 2 officers stand on the front porch, talking to Mrs. McLean. Mrs. McLean, "And I can't understand what happened to him." Blaine, reassuringly, "You say he's been gone for—" David and Cricket run into scene. Mrs. McLean, "What's the matter, David?" David, breathlessly, "Over there in the field, I heard something. I mean, it was more like I felt something." Mrs. McLean, "What?" David, "I don't know, a kind of buzzing sound deep down under the ground." Mrs. McLean, "Oh, David, this is no time to let your imagination run away with you, and I'm so concerned about your father." Jackson, "Don't worry, we'll find him, Mrs. McLean. Come on, Blaine." They exit from the porch. Mrs. McLean and David look after them. Dissolve to exterior, McLean field, day, medium shot. Blaine and Jackson are walking through the field. They stop and look around. Jackson, "The cow may have trampled him. They can be dangerous." Blaine, "Yeah, that's possible." Jackson, "You take the north side and I'll look over here." Blaine, "Okay." Exterior, McLean field, day, full shot. As the 2 men separate and walk toward Hill. The camera stays with Blaine, who stops and looks at something in the grass. Exterior, McLean field, day, medium shot. Blaine looking at flashlight in the grass. Exterior, McLean field, day, close shot. Of flashlight lying in the grass. Blaine's hand reaches into scene and picks it up. Exterior, McLean field, day, medium shot. Blaine straightens up with flashlight and calls, "Hey, Jackson, here's a flashlight." He looks around for Jackson. His face registers bewilderment. Exterior, McLean field, day, Blaine's ankle. The camera reveals an empty field with no possible place of concealment. Exterior, McLean field, day, medium shot. Blaine, calling, "Hey, Jackson!" He runs toward the spot where he last saw Jackson. He stops and looks uncertainly. Exterior, McLean field, day, full shot. Blaine with Hill in background. He stares about him in puzzled incredulity. Then a 4-foot round section of turf immediately behind him raises up about a foot. Exterior, McLean field, day, close shot. Blaine's face as he emits a choking scream and drops out of scene. Camera pans down to ground and we see a section of turf closing like the lid of a trapdoor spider. Dissolve to interior, McLean living room, day, full shot. Mrs. McLean is pacing nervously, and David stands looking out of the front window. Cricket is in the room. Mrs. McLean: "You're not going out there." David: "But they've been gone for over an hour. Let me go look too, Mom, please." Mrs. McLean: "You stay right here." David: "Aw, gee." McLean's voice, off scene: "Any chance of getting a cup of coffee?" Mrs. McLean and David turn toward doorway. Interior, McLean living room, day, medium shot. John McLean is standing in the living room doorway. He is wearing his bathrobe and pajamas. He looks somewhat disheveled. Overseen, Mrs. McLean and David speak together. Mrs. McLean and David: "John! Dad!" Interior, McLean living room, day, medium shot. As Mrs. McLean and David rush toward McLean. Mrs. McLean: "Oh, John, where have you been? I've been so worried." David: "Gee, Dad, what happened?" Cricket looks at McLean and crawls under the sofa. McLean looks down at his wife and son. His face is tense, and he wears a tight, forced smile. McLean: "Nothing to get excited about. Tell you all about it when I've had my coffee." McLean crosses and sits in an armchair. Mrs. McLean, exiting: "I'll just be a minute." David leans over the back of his father's chair. David: "What took you so long?" McLean, impatiently: "I've been looking for Blossom. I followed her trail but finally lost track of her in those scrub oak flats behind Blue Hill." Interior, McLean living room, day, close shot. David's face as he stares down at the back of his father's head. Interior, McLean living room, day, reverse close shot. David's angle of back of McLean's head. There is a livid red scar the size of a quarter on the back of his head, just above the nape of his neck. David's voice, overseen: "Gosh, Dad, what happened to your head?" Interior, McLean living room, day, medium close shot. A shadow of anger crosses McLean's face. McLean: "It's only a scratch. Caught it on a barbed wire fence." David: "A barbed wire fence? But how could—" McLean, interrupting: "Go on out and play." David: "But, Dad—" McLean suddenly slaps the boy a vicious backhand blow across the face, as Mrs. McLean enters the scene from background, carrying a cup of coffee. Mrs. McLean drops the cup, registering horrified incredulity. David staggers across the room and fetches up against the wall. Mrs. McLean crosses to him, puts her arms around him with a sheltering attitude. Cricket comes out from under the sofa and growls at McLean and huddles near David. McLean, coldly: "Now will you go out and play? And take that animal with you." Interior, McLean living room, day, medium close shot. David, his mother, with Cricket huddled close by. They stare at McLean with incredulous, baffled expressions. Mrs. McLean, in a low, hurried voice: "Please, David, Do as your father says. Interior, McLean living room, day, medium shot. David goes out through the hall, followed by Cricket. We hear the front door slam. McLean turns to his wife. McLean, in a cold, mechanical voice. I'm still waiting for my coffee. Mrs. McLean, in a tone of hurt bewilderment. What's the matter with you, Don? What's happened? McLean, get me a cup of coffee. Mrs. McLean exits, looking apprehensively over her shoulder at her husband. Dissolve to exterior, McLean front porch, mid-morning, full shot. Jackson, Blaine, and McLean are exiting onto the front porch. David is sitting on the steps with Cricket. Mrs. McLean stands nervously, twisting her apron, looking through the front screen door from the hallway. McLean. He now speaks normally and seems like his old self. Well, thanks, gentlemen. I won't keep you any longer. I'm sure you have important things to take care of. Exterior, McLean front porch, day, close shot. High angle, back of Jackson's head. As he removes cap and wipes forehead with handkerchief. A livid round red scar is on the back of his head, just above the nape of his neck. Exterior, McLean front porch, day. Reverse close shot. David's face, puzzled. He reacts to what he has seen. Exterior, McLean front porch, day. Medium shot. Jackson, Blaine, and McLean from David's angle. Blaine, with meaning. Yes, we have. Jackson nods his head. Exterior, McLean front porch, day, close shot. Mrs. McLean staring at her husband with nervous incredulity. Exterior, McLean front porch, day, full shot. Blaine and Jackson as they leave the porch. Jackson leans over and ruffles David's hair as he passes. Jackson. Take it easy on those comic books, youngster. Blaine, as they walk toward car. Yes, that imagination of yours is liable to get you in trouble. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior, back of McLean house, day, medium shot. Small hummock in foreground, McLean home in background. The hummock is thickly grown with bushes. The leaves of a bush are pushed slowly back, and the eyepiece of a 1-inch telescope pushes full into camera. Exterior, back of McLean house, day, close shot. David is lying on the ground behind the bushes, looking through the telescope. Cricket is with him. David raises his face from the eyepiece and looks over the telescope with interest and consternation. He then looks back through telescope. Exterior, field, day, as through telescope, matte. A little girl, Kathy Wilson, aged 5, walks across the field picking flowers. Suddenly, a round section of the earth opens up behind her, and an indistinct something grabs her by the ankles and snatches her down into the hole. A flap of earth closes back over the hole. Exterior, back of McLean house, day, pan shot. David and Cricket. As David jumps up, runs toward the field, stops with indecision, then turns and runs frantically toward the house, followed by the dog. Interior, hallway, McLean house, day, medium shot. As David and Cricket enter, and David starts toward the telephone. Then he looks over his shoulder toward the living room and stops. Interior, McLean living room, day, medium shot. David's angle. John McLean, sitting rigidly in a chair in the living room, staring fixedly at David. McLean. Well, what do you want? Interior, McLean living room, day, close shot. Shooting toward David and Cricket in hallway. David, hesitatingly. I was looking for Mom. McLean, sharply. She's not here. What's on your mind? David. Oh, nothing. What have you been up to? Nothing, just playing. Your mother told you not to play in the field, didn't she? But McLean, pointedly. I tell you, you can play in the field, all you want. Understand? David. Yes, sir. He turns and starts toward the front door, Cricket at his heels. Interior, McLean living room, day, close shot. McLean, as he picks up a map which he's holding in his lap and studies it intently. His head jerks up as the front screen door slams. He looks out the window. Exterior, front, McLean house, day, long shot. Through window, David and Cricket running down the road. Dissolve to exterior, back porch, Wilson house, day, full shot. This is a small cottage with an old-fashioned storm cellar door leading into the basement adjacent to back steps. David and Cricket walk into scene. David knocks on the door, which opens. David walks in. Cricket waits outside. Interior, Wilson kitchen, full shot. Mrs. Wilson dries her hands on her apron and pushes back a strand of hair from her forehead. Mrs. Wilson. Well, hello, David. David. Mrs. Wilson, is Mr. Wilson home? Mrs. Wilson, puzzled. Why, no, David, he's out of town. What is it? David. Well, I mean, you know your little girl. Mrs. Wilson, with instant alarm. Has something happened to Kathy? David. Well, I mean, gee, Mrs. Wilson, you see, I was up on the hill with my telescope, hiding in the bushes, and... Mrs. Wilson's face darkens with frightened suspicion. Mrs. Wilson. You were hiding in the bushes, and what happened? David. Well, I was watching the field, and I saw Kathy. She was picking flowers, I think. Mrs. Wilson. Yes. David. And then, well, the ground opened up, and something grabbed her and pulled her down into a hole. As she reacts with annoyance and disbelief. Mrs. Wilson. Oh, David, stop all this nonsense. Where is she? David backs away from Mrs. Wilson, who advances threateningly. David. Honest, Mrs. Wilson, there's something out there under the ground. It's a spaceship, or... Mrs. Wilson. What kind of a ship? David. A spaceship. Mrs. Wilson bursts into nervous laughter and grabs David by the shoulders and shakes him severely. Mrs. Wilson. Now listen, David. What have you done to my little girl? Where is she? Answer me. David, frantically. Honest, Mrs. Wilson, the ground opened up and... Mrs. Wilson slaps him sharply. David raises his elbow to ward off further blows. Mrs. Wilson. You tell me what you've done to Kathy. The sound of the back kitchen door opening causes Mrs. Wilson to look over her shoulder and react with relief. Interior, Wilson kitchen, day, new angle. Kathy Wilson is entering the kitchen. She stops and looks at her mother curiously. Mrs. Wilson rushes across the room and gathers the child in her arms. Mrs. Wilson. Kathy, honey, where have you been? What's happened? Two shot, Kathy and Mrs. Wilson. Kathy looks up at her mother with a round cherubic baby face. Kathy, blandly. Nothing, Mama. Mrs. Wilson, turning to David. Oh, David, how could you? She puts Kathy down. Interior, Wilson kitchen, day, medium two shot. David sidles around and attempts to get a look at the back of Kathy's head. She puts her hands to the back of her head and smooths her hair down. Interior, Wilson kitchen, day, 3-shot. Mrs. Wilson. What do you mean, coming in here and scaring me to death? What's the matter with you, David? David, flatly. I'm sorry. Mrs. Wilson. I am too. I'm sorry I lost my temper. She turns and reaches for the cookie box. Mrs. Wilson. Here, don't you want some cookies and a glass of milk? David, starting toward kitchen door. No, thank you. Mrs. Wilson. I'm really very sorry, David, for the way I treated you, but after all... Here, dear, take some cookies with you. David. I'm not hungry. At this point, he's reached the kitchen door. Exterior, rear of Wilson house, day, full shot. Cricket is barking frantically at a column of smoke that issues from the open cellar door. David comes out of kitchen door, sees the smoke coming from the cellar, and calls back inside. David, calling, Mrs. Wilson, your house is on fire. Mrs. Wilson runs to the screen door and exits, carrying Kathy with her into the yard. Exterior, rear of Wilson house, day, medium shot. Smoke is pouring out the cellar door. Mrs. Wilson places Kathy on the ground, then snatches a garden hose and runs to a faucet near the back porch. She fumblingly attempts to attach it, just as a neighbor, Arthur Turner, a man about 45, runs into scene. He quickly attaches the hose while David points the nozzle toward the cellar door. He turns on the water, then runs and takes the hose from David, adjusts the nozzle to spray, then, ducking his head against the billowing smoke, enters the cellar. Exterior, rear Wilson house, day, full shot. As Turner directs the spray of water into the cellar, we can see red tongues of flame diminish. He advances into the cellar. Mrs. Wilson is frantically trying to peer through the smoke. David. You'd better call the fire department, Mrs. Wilson. Mrs. Wilson, calling through smoke. Mr. Turner, shall I call the fire department? Turner's voice, off scene. No, I've got it under control. Mrs. Wilson steps back and sighs with relief. Kathy crosses to her mother and stands pressed against her mother's leg, calmly watching the smoke. Exterior, rear Wilson house, day, close 2-shot. As David sidles around Kathy and looks at the back of her head. Exterior, Wilson house, day, full shot. As Turner backs up out of the cellar, coughing. He is turning off the hose at the nozzle as he exits. He drops the hose, crosses to the faucet, and turns off the valve. He takes out a handkerchief and dabs at his streaming eyes. Turner. It's all right, Mrs. Wilson. It's out. Mrs. Wilson, relieved. Oh, thank heavens. Turner. Someone spilled a gallon can of gasoline down there. Mrs. Wilson. That's impossible. We keep our spare gasoline in the garage. Turner. Well, a can of gasoline was lying over on its side down there with the top off. That's what was burning. Are you sure? Positive. Kathy, were you down in the cellar? Kathy, blandly. No, Mama. Exterior, Wilson, day, close shot. Kathy's face as her eyes look up and meet David's. Exterior, Wilson house, day, close shot. David, staring intently at Kathy. Close shot. Kathy, as she smiles faintly, and her eyes take on a curious, hard, triumphant expression. Quick dissolve to interior, grocery store, day, full shot. With telephone booth in foreground. David enters scene, followed by Cricket. They go into phone booth, and David closes the door. Interior, telephone booth, day, medium shot. David drops a nickel in the coin box. David, into phone. State 43559, please. Exterior, Griffith Observatory, day, full shot. Dissolve to interior Professor Stuart Kelston's office, day, full shot. His secretary, a woman of indeterminate age, wearing horn-rimmed spectacles, is speaking on the telephone. Secretary, into phone. I'm sorry, David, but Professor Kelston is out. Is there any message? Interior, phone booth, day, close shot. David, into phone. Do you know when he'll be back? Interior, Professor Kelston's office, day, close shot. Secretary, into phone. He's not expected until late this afternoon. Interior, phone booth, day, close shot. David, into phone. Oh, gee. Never mind. Thank you. David hangs up and is about to leave the booth when he sees his father enter the grocery store. Interior, grocery store, day, through door of phone booth. McLean buying a pack of cigarettes. Interior, phone booth, day, close shot. David sees McLean and crouches down behind the solid panel of the phone booth door. He holds Cricket to keep him from barking. Interior, grocery store, day, medium shot. McLean turns and leaves scene, walking past phone booth. Exterior, phone booth, day, medium shot. As the door opens and David peeps out. Then he and Cricket emerge. David stops, pauses with indecision. His decision crystallizes into resolution. He sets his chin and compresses his lips and walks quickly out of scene, followed by Cricket. Dissolve to interior police station, day, full shot. David and Cricket stand staring up at the desk sergeant, who speaks in an exasperated tone. Desk sergeant: I'm telling you, the chief of police don't see nobody without their first stating the nature of their business. David, pleadingly: But I've got to see him, it's important. Desk sergeant: Well, if it's so important, why can't you tell me? 'Cause you wouldn't believe me. So what makes you think the chief would believe you? Chief of police's voice, off scene: What's the trouble, Finley? Camera angle widens to include a jovial, middle-aged, heavy-set man standing in a half-open doorway. The door is lettered, Chief of Police. Desk sergeant: This kid here claims he's got something very important, but he won't tell me what it is. David: Are you the Chief of Police, sir? Chief of Police: That's right. Come in, son. David crosses and enters the chief's office, followed by Cricket. The door closes behind them. Interior, office of Chief of Police, day, full shot. The chief crosses and sits in a swivel chair at his desk. He indicates a chair for David. Chief: Sit down, young man. Now, what's your name? David: David McLean. Chief: Well, what's so important, David? David looks apprehensively, clears his throat, and starts. Well, you see, sir, it started last night when I was looking through my telescope. Dissolve to interior, office, Chief of Police, day, close shot. The chief is listening intently, leaning his hand on his cheek. David's voice: And that's the truth, sir. Every word of it, and I know they're under there because I've seen them. Camera dollies back to two shot. Chief: And after people have been down there, they act different, huh? David: Yes, sir. Very different. Chief: What's your telephone number, David? Webster 6397. The chief reaches over and picks up the telephone. David, in alarm: But you're not going to call my father, please, please. The chief of police swings around in his swivel chair and speaks into the phone. Webster 6397. He looks over his shoulder at David, who is nervously biting his lips. Chief: Now take it easy, son. Then he turns back to the telephone. Interior, Chief of Police Office, day, close shot. David is staring at the back of the chief's head. Interior, Chief of Police's Office, day, close shot. On the back of the chief's head, there's a round, red, livid spot just above the nape of the neck. Interior, Chief of Police's Office, day, close shot. David reacts to what he has seen. Dissolve to Interior, Jail Detention Room, day, full shot. This is a rather barren room with a bench and a straight back chair. David stands at the window, staring through the heavy wire grill. His lips tremble and his face is pinched and white, and terror lives in his eyes. Startled, he looks over his shoulder at the sound of the door opening. He turns and stands at bay. He picks up Cricket and backs against the wall next to the window. McLean's voice, off scene. All right, David. Interior, Jail Detention Room, day, reverse shot. John McLean stands near the open door. His face bears a sad, resigned expression. The Chief of Police stands with his hands clasped behind his back. He is benign and kindly in his attitude. Dr. James Blake, a well-favored young man in his early 30s, stands looking at David with a friendly, gracious smile. Next to him, Patricia Collins smiles down at David with affectionate concern. She is dressed in a nurse's blue cape, and the stiff white cuffs and uniform collar are apparent below and above the cape. Dr. Blake. Hello, David. I'm Dr. Blake. David stares up at him, tight-mouthed and tight-lipped. Pat advances and tries to put her hand on David's shoulder. He pulls away. Dr. Blake, reassuringly. There's nothing to be afraid of, David. This is Miss Collins. David stares up at his father, then at the Chief of Police, then back to Dr. Blake. He starts to back away, but Pat's arm restrains him gently. Pat. No one's going to hurt you. McLean, to David. Listen to me. David looks up at his father. McLean, continuing. These people are going to take you to, school for a little while. It's for your own good, understand? I'll take care of the dog. David, frantically. You're not going to take Cricket. He makes a dash for the outer door. McLean steps forward and grabs his wrist and holds it with unnecessary force. David winces. Dr. Blake steps forward quickly, glances curiously at McLean, and detaches his fingers from the boy's arm. Blake, kindly. It's all right, David. You can bring your dog. David, in a scared voice. But I don't understand why. Pat crosses and inserts David's arms through hers and pats his hand. Pat, gently. Come on, David. Your father knows what's best. We're going to be good friends. Just wait and see. Dr. Blake opens the door with one hand, casually takes David's arm, and they swiftly exit with him out into the hall, closing the door behind them. Dissolve to Exterior, County Hospital, night, full shot. Dissolve to Interior Hospital, night, insert. Sign reading, mental ward. Dissolve to Interior, Dr. Blake's consultation room, night, full shot. David is seated in a large, comfortable, overstuffed chair. A practically empty plate of sandwiches stands on a coffee table next to the chair. David feeds a piece of sandwich to Cricket. Pat, who has removed her cape and is now wearing a starched RN cap, enters the scene with 3 paper cartons of malted milk. Dr. Blake has removed his coat and is seated on a sofa facing David. Pat passes one of the containers to Dr. Blake, who opens the top and inserts a straw. She hands the other one to David, then sits on the sofa near the doctor and starts drinking her malted milk. David is in a much better frame of mind than in the preceding scene. David: "And that's what happened. Look, doctor, if you'd talk to my mother, she'll tell you about my father, about how he's changed and everything." Pat and Blake exchange glances. Blake: "That's a good idea, David. In fact, I had already thought of it." David: "You've talked to her?" Blake: "Only over the phone. She ought to be here any minute now. You know, that's a very interesting story you just told us." David, resignedly: "You don't believe me, do you?" Blake: "Oh, I wouldn't go so far as to say that. Better say, I'm keeping an open mind." Pat: "And so am I." Blake: "There are no scars on the back of my head, David." Pat, showing him: "Nor mine." David looks at their heads, then sits back with relief and takes a slow, meditative pull on his malted milk straw. Interior, Dr. Blake's reception room, night, medium shot. The door opens and Mrs. McLean enters. She looks around, sees no one, crosses to desk, and taps the bell. Interior, Dr. Blake's consultation room, night, full shot. They all look up at the sound of the bell. Blake rises and crosses to the door. Blake opens door. "Mrs. McLean?" Mrs. McLean's voice, off-scene. "Yes?" Blake: "Won't you come in? I'm Dr. Blake." Mrs. McLean enters. David jumps up from the chair and runs to his mother. David: "Gee, Mom, I'm glad you're here." Blake: "This is Miss Collins." Mrs. McLean looks down and smiles brittlely. Then she coldly detaches his hand from her arm. Mrs. McLean, impatiently: "How do you do? Sit down, David." David stares at her, backs away, and slowly sits back in the chair. Mrs. McLean's face is calm and composed, and her manner brightly pleasant, almost to the point of incongruity. She wears a light coat with a high collar and carries a purse. Blake: "Won't you sit down, Mrs. McLean?" Mrs. McLean: "No, thanks. My husband's waiting for me." Blake: "David tells me—" Mrs. McLean, interrupting: "I know what David's been telling you. He's always been highly imaginative, and we've had a great deal of trouble with him, especially since he got that telescope and has been reading those trashy science fiction magazines." Blake, looking up: "Science fiction?" Mrs. McLean: "Yes, horrible weird things with pictures of monsters that come in spaceships from other planets." Blake: "I see. And he has discussed these stories with you?" Mrs. McLean: "Incessantly. He's gotten completely beyond our control." Blake, with decision: "All right, Mrs. McLean. I'm sure we'll be able to help him." Mrs. McLean turns and looks at David with unsympathetic eyes. Mrs. McLean: "Now you be a good boy and do what the doctor tells you." She walks toward the door. Interior, Dr. Blake's consultation room, night, close shot. David stares incredulously at his mother. His eyes focus on the back of her head as she walks toward the door. Interior, Dr. Blake's consultation room, night, reverse. David's angle of Mrs. McLean's head. The back of her head is concealed by her hair and the high collar of her coat. Interior of Dr. Blake's consultation room, night, medium long shot. David looks up quickly at Dr. Blake, who is also looking at Mrs. McLean's head as she opens the door and exits. Dr. Blake's and David's eyes meet in a curious look of understanding. Dr. Blake takes a notebook and pencil from his pocket. Blake: "Have you any relatives, David? Around here, I mean?" David, shaking his head: "Just my Aunt Margaret, but she lives over in Crystal Falls." Blake. What's her name and address? David. Miss Margaret McLean, 926 Drexel Avenue, Crystal Falls. Why? Blake. Oh, just in case something comes up. He squeezes David's shoulder reassuringly. We'll work this out together, David. Blake exchanges a meaningful look at Pat. He crosses to an end table and picks up some magazines, which he hands to David. Blake continued. Mind amusing yourself for a few minutes? David. No, sir. Blake. Those are the latest issues of Look and Life. We'll be right back. David. Thank you, sir. Blake and Pat exit into the laboratory. Interior, Dr. Blake's laboratory, night. Full shot. Blake and Pat enter. Pat looks up. Pat, shaking her head. That woman's a cold-blooded person if I ever saw one. Blake. Too cold-blooded. You know, dear, I think that boy is telling the truth. Pat. But surely you don't believe... He crosses to the desk and punches an automatic telephone directory list, then dials a number. Pat. Who are you calling? Blake. Stuart Kelston. David says he's a very good friend of his. Pat, as he dials. You don't expect to find him at the observatory at this time of night, do you? Blake. That's when astronomers work, my dear. Into phone. Hello, Professor Kelston, please. Pat sits beside Blake, placing her hand upon his shoulder affectionately. Blake. Hello, Stu. Jim Blake. Interior, Professor Kelston's office, observatory, night, medium shot. Kelston is a lean, sandy-haired, angular man with a pleasant Scandinavian face and a slow, pedantic method of speech. Kelston. Hello, Jim. Who? Yes, I know him. No, I'd say just the opposite. Matter of fact, I think he has the makings of a first-rate scientist. He chuckles. Of course, I mean astronomer. What other science is there? Why, certainly. Come on up to the main entrance and ring the night bell. Right. Goodbye. He hangs up the phone and assumes a thoughtful, puzzled expression. Dissolve to exterior, newspaper building, night, full shot. There's a sign reading, Herald News. Dissolve to interior of editor's office, night, medium shot. Ralph Pulser, a dignified middle-aged gentleman, is seated at his desk, talking to John McLean, who is standing looking down at him. Pulser, shrugging his shoulders. I don't get it. In the first place, I gave up legwork several years ago, and in the second place, I don't see why you can't give me some inkling as to what the story is about. McLean. This story is so important that I am not taking anyone out there except you. And if you don't want to go, I'll try the editor of the Blade. Pulser, with resignation. All right, Mr. McLean. Pick me up at 10 o'clock tonight. McLean. Alone. Pulser. I'll be alone, and the story'd better be worth it. McLean. It will be. You'll see. Dissolve to exterior, Griffith Park Observatory, night, long shot. As the camera trucks in with the car, the headlights illuminate the facade and the heavy bronze door in high key. The lights cut off, and Blake, Pat, and David enter the observatory. Interior, foyer of observatory, night, medium shot. Pat, Blake, and David. The Foucault pendulum is in the background. The interior of the observatory foyer is illuminated in low key. Pat. What's that thing? David, glibly. That's the Foucault pendulum. It demonstrates the peripheral aberration of axial inclination. Then David realizes he is talking to an amateur. Pat turns and stares at David in astonishment. David, continuing, I mean, it shows how much the Earth is tilting on its axis. At this point, Professor Kelston approaches. Kelston. Well, it didn't take you very long. Blake. You've met Patricia Collins, Stu. Pat. Of course. How are you, Professor? Kelston. Fine, thank you. Blake. I believe you know... Kelston, interrupting and affectionately putting his hand on David's shoulder. Yes, David and I are old friends. Let's go to my office. Interior, Professor Kelston's office, night. Full shot. Large-scale star maps hang on the walls, interspersed with large photographs of comets, spiral nebulae, solar coronae, various lunar and solar eclipses. His desk is littered with a miscellaneous array of meteorites, photographs, and electrical viewing apparatus for astronomical plates. Professor Kelston seats himself at his desk, after indicating comfortable chairs in which his visitors dispose themselves. Kelston. Now, what's the big mystery? Blake. Well, first we'd like to have a look at the back of your head. A slow smile comes over Kelston's face, and his eyes twinkle. Kelston. Are you sure some of these patients you deal with aren't contagious? Blake. Tonight I'm not altogether sure of anything. Blake and David are seated together on a leather divan. Blake, continuing. No, seriously, you don't happen to have any scars on the back of your head, do you? Kelston. Not since football. Why? Blake. Mind letting us have a look? Kelston. Are you serious? Blake nods in affirmation. Kelston rises, crosses in front of the desk, and turns his head around for inspection. Kelston. The bump of intelligence is practically invisible. Blake looks at Kelston's head. Okay. Kelston straightens and leans back against the edge of his desk. Kelston, puzzled. I don't get it. Blake, seriously. I'd like David to take it from here. All right, David. David, uncomfortably. Well, every time I tell anybody this, they think I'm crazy. Looking up at Blake. That is, Blake. Now, David, you go right ahead. David. Well, it started last night. I was looking for variables in Orion, and all of a sudden I saw this bright light. Dissolve to. Interior, Kelston's office, night. Camera pulls back from Kelston's face. He is smoking a pipe and is staring meditatively through the smoke. Blake's voice, off-scene. And every one of the people that have those scars behaves strangely. Kelston turns to David. Are you positive that you saw these creatures or whatever they are pull the little Wilson girl under the ground? David. Yes, sir. I wasn't 200 yards away, and I was looking through my 1-inch telescope, and it's 50 power. Kelston. How far is this field from your house, David? David. About 1/4 mile. Blake, to Kelston. Then we could see it from here with the 16-inch. David, excitedly. Yes, sir, I know we could. He turns to Kelston. You know that time last summer when you let me look right into the kitchen window and I could see Mom in there cooking supper? Kelston, hesitatingly. That was last summer, David. Since then, because of the top-secret experiments at White Sands, the Army has instructed me to allow no one but my staff to use the telescope. He pauses. But, under the circumstances, I'm sure it will be all right. Let's take a look. They exit. Dissolve to. Exterior, Griffith Telescope Room, night, medium shot. Opening of upper aperture and dome rotating approximately 60 degrees and stopping. Interior, Griffith Telescope Room, night, medium shot. Kelston, Blake, Pat, and David station themselves at multiple oculars while Kelston focuses instrument with manual verniers. Kelston. We're fortunate. There's plenty of moonlight tonight. Exterior, McLean Field, night, through telescope, Matt. David, excitedly. That's it. That's where they got Kathy Wilson. Pat's voice, overseen. Good heavens, I never imagined you could see so clearly. Interior, Griffith Telescope Room, night, medium shot. Kelston. Now let's increase the magnification so we can get a closer view. Exterior, McLean Field, night, through telescope, Matt. The telescope zooms into medium long shot and sharpens. An automobile comes slowly into the field of vision and stops, and the lights are extinguished. David's voice, off scene. That's Dad's car. A front door of the sedan opens, and the dome light illuminates the interior of the car in comparative high key. David's voice, off scene. Someone's with him. Kelston's voice, off scene. Let's get a real close look. The telescope field narrows and brings McLean and his companion up into a medium close shot. Blake's voice, off scene. That looks like Ralph Pulsar. Pat's voice, off scene. The editor of the Herald News? Kelston's voice, off scene. Yes, that's who it is. I know him. Pulsar seems to be discussing something rather vehemently with McLean. He suddenly shrugs his shoulders, takes the flashlight which McLean offers him, gets out of the car and closes the door, walks around the car and starts out across the field, lighting his way with the flashlight. Blake's voice, off scene. Your father stayed in the car. David's voice, off scene. That man's walking right to the place where... The telescope shot pans with Pulsar as he ascends a slight rise. He reaches the top of the mound and stops, turning the flashlight in a slow circle about him, when suddenly the flashlight goes out and all is darkness. Interior, telescope room, night, close shot. Group around telescope. They look up from the oculars and stare at each other, with speechless amazement. Kelston reaches for the verniers. They look back into the oculars. Exterior, McLean Field, night, through telescope, Matt. It pans down to McLean's automobile just in time to see the headlights turn on and the car move rapidly out of scene. Interior, telescope room, night, medium shot. Group around telescope. They look at Kelston with questioning faces. Kelston, calmly. If you'll go back to my office, I'll join you there in a few minutes. Blake takes Pat's arm and he, Pat, and David exit. Kelston crosses to his desk and flips a switch on the intercom. Kelston, into intercom. George, when did you check the rocket at White Sands last? Pause. No, don't bother. I'll check it myself as long as I'm up here. Kelston hangs up the intercom, crosses to the switch box, and presses a button. The upper aperture slowly turns on its axis. Exterior, observatory dome, night, medium shot. The dome slowly turns on its axis and stops. Interior, telescope room, night, medium shot. Kelston has just finished swinging the telescope into position. He looks into the eyepiece. Exterior, White Sands, night. Special effects, stock shot. We see a giant rocket standing upright in a takeoff position. Interior, telescope room, night, medium shot. Kelston steps down from the telescope and crosses to a small desk lighted by a low-power student's lamp. He sits down and dials the telephone. Kelston, into phone. Hello, operator. This is Professor Stuart Kelson at the Astronomical Observatory. Get me the White Sands Rocket Proving Station, please. Pause. Hello? White Sands? Give me the security office. Hello? Is Colonel Fielding there? Yes, it's most important. Hello, Colonel. This is Stuart Kelston at the observatory. Operation 925 is with us. Interior, Colonel Fielding's office, night, medium shot. Colonel Fielding, head of White Sands Security Division, is seated at his desk talking into the phone. A keen, executive-type man, he is in his shirt sleeves, but in uniform. Colonel Fielding, into phone. What? Are you sure? All right, I'll be at your office in the morning, 9 o'clock. Right. Goodbye. The colonel hangs up the phone and assumes a thoughtful expression. He rises and crosses to a filing cabinet, removes a key from his pocket, and unlocks the file. He pulls out a drawer from which he takes a manila folder. He crosses back to his desk, seats himself, and then opens the folder, removing some papers. We dolly into an insert of the label on the outside of the folder. It reads, Operation 925, Top Secret. Dissolve to Interior, Professor Kelston's office, night, full shot. Pat, David, and Blake are on scene. Kelston enters and crosses behind his desk, opens a drawer, and takes out a large scrapbook. Kelston to David. Young man, it looks like you've stumbled onto something that the government has been concerned about for some time. Blake, Pat, and David cross the desk. Kelston opens scrapbook. Pat. What do you mean? Kelston. You've seen most of these magazine and newspaper stories of so-called flying saucers before, but have you ever seen them compiled in one book? Insert scrapbook, with clips of flying saucer stories. Camera pans from one headline to another. Kelston, off scene. When you see them all together, they begin to add up. Interior, Professor Kelston's office, night, full shot. Blake. But the authorities have denied all these stories. Kelston. Yes, they have, and they will probably continue to do so. Pat. But why? Why not keep the public informed? Kelston. Lack of complete information, I suppose, and perhaps afraid it would cause panic and hysteria. David. Where are these spaceships from, Professor Kelston? Kelston. Our observations lead us to believe they are from motherships in free orbit just above Earth's atmosphere. Pat. But where are these motherships from? Kelston. Nobody knows. We've worked out a postulate and Mars seems to be the logical point of origin. Step in here and I'll show you. Dissolve to Interior, Planetarium, Lecture Room, Night, medium shot. Kelston is seated at the operating console. Pat, David, and Blake are standing by it. The projector is in background. Kelston turns a rheostat and the light dims. Kelston, pointing. That's our planetary system there. Interior, Planetarium, Lecture Room, shooting up at dome, effect shot. Of our planetary system on inverted dome of planetarium. A white projected arrow indicates each point as Kelston speaks off-scene. Kelston's voice, off-scene. This is the Earth moving around the Sun on this orbit. And this is the orbit of Mars. And here is the relative position of Mars and Earth tonight. Pat's voice, off-scene. Why, they're our next-door neighbors. Kelston's voice, off-scene. Yes, only a little over 3 million miles. Pat's voice, off-scene. It would take forever to travel 3 million miles. Kelston's voice, off-scene. Hardly. The scene on the planetarium changes. Interior, Planetarium, Lecture Room, night, medium shot. Kelston. Our Earth is traveling through space at well over 100,000 miles an hour. At that speed, we could reach Mars in 30 days. Or they could reach us. Pat. But I don't understand. Why don't we burn up from friction? Kelston. There isn't any atmosphere in space, therefore no friction. Blake. But why do you think they're from Mars? Interior, planetarium lecture room, shooting up at dome, effect shot. Kelston's voice, off scene. Because Mars is closer to us than any other planet. They are now in their winter, and those are polar caps, the same as ours. See how much smaller they are in summer? Those dark areas are vegetation. Pat's voice, off scene. Do they have cities too, the same as ours? Kelston's voice, off scene. If they do, they are underground. The low oxygen content and extremes of temperature indicate a subterranean culture. David's voice, off scene. Those things in our pasture are subterranean, all right. Interior, planetarium lecture room, night, medium shot. As the house lights go up. Kelston sits at the control console. Pat. But how would Martians have enough intelligence to build spaceships? Kelston. The human race doesn't have a monopoly on intelligence. Besides, Mars is millions of years older than we are. Pat. But what's their reason for traveling so far through space? Kelston. Mars is a dying planet. They are losing their oxygen and water. Blake. Then this could be the start of an invasion. Kelston. I'm afraid it is. Pat. But why did they begin here? Kelston. Because of the operations at White Sands. Pat. But all they're doing at White Sands is just shooting rockets up into the air. Kelston. Exactly. Very high up into the air, beyond atmosphere and into space. The scientists at White Sands have developed a rocket powerful enough to take them to these motherships in outer space. That rocket is completed and ready to be fired right now. That may be the Martians' objective. He rises. However, we'll have the answers to a lot of our questions tomorrow. Colonel Fielding, the head of the security division, will be in my office in the morning. I'm sure he will want to talk to all of you. Can you be here? Blake. Certainly. What time? Kelston. 9 o'clock. Blake, Pat, and David rise. Kelston comes with them to the door. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior, Griffith Observatory, day, long shot. Dissolve through to interior, Kelston's office, day, full shot. Colonel Robert Fielding is seated at Kelston's desk, talking to Kelston. Blake, Pat, and David are seated on chairs in the office. David is just hanging up the telephone. David. I don't know where they could be. If they're at home, they're not answering the phone. I called last night, and this is the second time this morning. Fielding, rising. I see. Come on, young man. You and I are going out to do a little investigating. David. Can we stop by the hospital and get my dog? Fielding. I don't think we'd better take the time right now. Blake. We'll take care of him, David. Blake and David exit. Kelston stops Fielding at the door. Kelston, in a low voice. Just a moment, Colonel. I called Ralph Pulser's office this morning. He's left town with Chief of Police Barrows and Detectives Jackson and Blaine, and they didn't say where they were going. Fielding. Will you give me a description of all these people? I'll phone you later. Kelston. I will, Colonel. Dissolve to exterior, front of McLean's house, day, full shot. A Cadillac limousine with a long whip aerial pulls up in front of the house and stops. It is driven by Sergeant Bellardi. He opens the door and Fielding and David step out. David runs up the driveway. Fielding remains standing by the car door. Fielding. Sergeant, phone Professor Kelson at the observatory and see if he has that information I wanted. Bellardi, reaching for the phone. Yes, sir. Fielding turns and exits from the scene. Pan 2. Exterior, front of McLean House, day. Medium shot. David is waiting in the driveway as Fielding joins him. David. The car's not here. Fielding. Well, let's take a look inside the house. They walk toward the front door. Exterior, front McLean House, day, medium close shot. Bellardi is on the telephone in the car, holding a notebook on his knee and writing. Bellardi. Yes, sir. John McLean, age 35, height 5 feet 11 inches, weight 165, hair brown. Interior, McLean bedroom, day, full shot. Fielding is standing in the middle of the room, and David is standing before an open closet, very perturbed. David, perturbed. My mother's suitcase is gone and my father's rifle. He used to keep it in this closet. Fielding. What kind of a rifle? David. A .30-06. Fielding. I'd like to talk to someone who... What about that little girl, the one you think set fire to her mother's house? David. Kathy Wilson? I can take you over there. Dissolve 2. Exterior, Wilson front porch, day, full shot. Mrs. Wilson stands on the porch, talking to Fielding, Bellardi, and David. She is distraught and nervous. Fielding. I'm very sorry to hear that, Mrs. Wilson. When did it happen? Mrs. Wilson, through tears. Early this morning. Fielding. What did the doctors say? Mrs. Fielding. He said something about a cerebral hemorrhage. Then, semi-hysterically, but how a little child could have a thing like that? Exterior, Wilson House, day, close shot. David, reacting and thinking about his mother and father. Fielding's voice, off-scene. Mrs. Wilson, I don't like to disturb you at a time like this, but there's just one question I'd like to ask you. Do you have any idea why your little girl started the fire in the cellar yesterday? Exterior, Wilson House, medium group shot. Mrs. Wilson. I don't know what started the fire, and I don't know why you have to torture me with a lot of questions. Fielding, bowing. I'm sorry, and I won't bother you any more. David stands frozen, thinking what could happen to his mother and father. Fielding. Thank you. Come along, David. Mrs. Wilson turns abruptly and enters the front door. Dissolve 2. Exterior, McLean Field, day, full shot. Fielding, Bellardi, and David, with the bushes in foreground where David observed Kathy Wilson's capture through his small telescope. Fielding holds a monocular, a sports scope, in his hand. Fielding, to David. Can you point out the place where the Wilson child disappeared? He hands the monocular to David, who adjusts it. David, after a slight pause. There, those 3 white stones are right by the edge of it. You can even see the crack. See it over there? Fielding. Let's have a look. David hands him the monocular. Fielding looks through it. Exterior, McLean Field, day. Telescope, matte shot. A faint crack, approximately 4 feet in diameter, is clearly visible near 3 white stones. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Fielding removes the monocular from his eye and turns to Sergeant Bellardi. Fielding, pointing. See those bushes down there by the road, Sergeant? Bellardi. Yes, sir. Fielding. There are 3 white stones in the field about 100 feet from there at 2 o'clock. Velarde. Yes, sir, I see them. Fielding. Go down behind those bushes, and when you get there, throw some rocks as close to those 3 white stones as you can. Yes, sir. Whatever's down there must be sensitive to sound, so keep your distance. Yes, sir. And when I signal you, come back here on the double. Yes, sir. The sergeant crosses out of scene, and Fielding turns to David. Fielding to David. Just exactly what did this thing look like, son? The thing that grabbed the little Wilson girl. David. It moved so fast it was hard for me to see exactly what it looked like. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium close shot. Velarde. He kneels on one knee beside a small pile of stones about the size of peaches. He takes one in his right hand and hurls it over the bushes as one throws a grenade. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Fielding and David, as Fielding looks through monocular. Exterior, McLean Field, day, matte shot. Through monocular, of stone falling near the center of the shot. Fielding, off scene. Well, that one ought to be close enough for them to hear. Another stone falls in the same area, and a circular 4-foot section of earth slowly rises about 6 inches, revealing an indistinct shape that moves as though someone or something were peering out of the crack. Fielding, off scene. Something's moving, but I can't make out what it is. Another stone falls near the trapdoor, and it closes swiftly. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Fielding and David, as Fielding lowers monocular. Fielding. That's a trapdoor, all right. Something's in there. David looks at him and nods concerned affirmation. Fielding raises his monocular again and looks toward the bushes where Sergeant Velarde was throwing the rocks. Fielding. Where's Velarde? Come on. He runs toward Field. David follows, and camera pans with them. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Fielding and David warily approach the bushes behind which the sergeant was throwing rocks. Suddenly, they stop, staring at the ground. David. They got him. See there? Exterior, McLean Field, day, reverse close shot. Their angle of the faint, circular, 4-foot outline near where the sergeant was last seen. His military cap lies on the ground, and scratches and gouges show where his fingers clawed as he was dragged down into the hole. Fielding's voice, off scene. That's the last one they'll get. Come on, son. Dissolve 2. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Fielding's car. Fielding reaches into car and flips the catch on the fishpole antenna, which flies up. David watches with interest as Fielding takes out a phone and pushes the button on the handset. Fielding into phone. This is WJ605. Dispatch White Sands 121A. Closed circuit. Expedite. Priority A14. Hello? Walter? Fielding. Operation 925 is with us. Yes, I'm sure. Now, hear this. I want you to muster 2 platoons and a demolition team, with plenty of C2 charge. Equip them with submachine guns and grenades. Bring the light Sherman tank and get here as fast as you can. Get rolling. I'll expect you here by tomorrow at 1400. Got that? Rendezvous is at the intersection of State Highway 86 and Belmead Road. If any newspaper people ask you any questions, tell them it's a training maneuver. Right. Goodbye. He presses the stud again. WJ605, dispatch 143, expedite. Closed circuit. Hello? Cagle? Fielding, Operation 925. Yes. Now clear the boards for this. Cover all key supply sources for the White Sands rocket project. Fielding, reading from notebook. Put out an all-points alarm for the following subjects. John McClane, age 35, height 5 feet 11, weight 165, hair, dissolve 2, insert, exterior, plate glass door. It reads U.S. Army Intelligence, Major G.A. Cagle. Dissolve 2, interior, U.S. Army Intelligence Office, day, full shot. Major Cagle is seated at his desk, listening on the phone and writing on a pad. He is an alert, hawk-eyed man who looks like a successful attorney. Cagle, in a sharp, incisive manner. Yes, Colonel, I have it. John McClane, Mary McClane, Ralph Pulitzer, Chief Fred Barrow, Detectives Jackson and Blaine. Yes, sir, all points bulletin, and they are to be returned to Dr. Blake at the county hospital. He hangs up the phone and flips the toggle on an intercom box on his desk. Cagle, into intercom. Clear the teletype. Encode this right away with special attention to Armstrong Liquid Oxygen Plant and Lair Magnesium Plant. Also, all other key supply sources for the White Sands rocket project. Get that? First subject. John McClane, age 35, height 5 feet 11. Wipe 2. Montage. 1. Teletypes. 2. Hands operating telegraph keys in high-speed code. 3. Telegraph wires, odd angles. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior alley. Silhouette of Lair Magnesium Plant in background. Night. Long shot. Detectives Blaine and Jackson run toward camera and turn around corner of building and stand flattened against the wall. Camera pans to Blaine and Jackson. Behind them is sign, Lair Magnesium Plant. The scene is lighted in low key by streetlight. Overseen, there is a terrific, shattering explosion. Exterior, alley, night, long shot. The silhouette of the factory is gone. A siren off-scene builds up to a crescendo. Exterior, alley, night, full shot. Blaine and Jackson as they turn and run away from an Army military police car that pulls up to the curb. They turn and run up the alley in the direction from whence they came, and the headlights of another military police car come into alley with siren going. Exterior, alley, night, close shot. Blaine and Jackson huddle back against the wall, caught in the blazing headlights of the 2 military police cars, as a group of soldiers emerge from each car and converge upon Blaine and Jackson with drawn revolvers. Quick dissolve 2. Exterior, wire fence, oxygen plant, night, full shot. The camera pans along the woven wire fence and pulls in on exterior, wire fence, oxygen plant, night, medium shot. Sentry, standing guard at which is obviously a side gate. Insert, sign over gate. Armstrong Liquid Oxygen Plant. A small sign underneath reads, Apply to main gate for admittance. Camera pulls back to exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium shot, sentry. He straightens up at the sound of a car approaching off-scene. The motor of the car sputters and the headlights pick up the sentry as the forepart of the car moves into scene. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium shot, sedan in background, sentry in foreground. Sentry. You can't park here, lady. Mary McClane. Something's the matter with my car. I think it's the ignition. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium close shot. Through window of car, Mary McClane, speaking to sentry in background. Mary McClane, continuing. Do you suppose you could find out what's the matter with it? Sentry, leaning rifle against fence. "I'm not much of a mechanic, lady, but I'll take a look." He crosses to the front of the car, and there's a click as Mary McLean releases the hood catch. The sentry leans over the motor and turns on his flashlight. The rear door of the sedan opens, and John McLean moves swiftly around behind the sentry, carrying a rifle. There is a thud as he strikes the sentry over the back of the head with the rifle butt, and the sentry falls over the fender of the car, unconscious, and then falls to the ground. McLean closes the hood of the car and drags the sentry over near the fence. McLean, "Start the motor. I'll be right back." There is the sound of the engine starting over scene. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, new angle. As McLean swiftly enters the gate the sentry was guarding and runs to the corner of the adjacent brick building. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium shot. Corner of building, as McLean peers around it. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, long shot. McLean's angle. Lighted window and small building in background. A man is seated working at a desk. He has a fringe of bushy white hair and a bald head. From the silhouette, he looks very much like Albert Einstein. Behind the desk at which he is working is the usual paraphernalia of a physicist's lab. John McLean, in the foreground, raises his rifle to his shoulder and steadies it against the corner of the building. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium close shot, matte. Scientist, with crossed hairs of rifle telescope sights superimposed on view. The scientist suddenly leans forward to pick up a book. As he does so, a glass retort on the shelf behind him is shattered by a bullet. The scientist looks fearfully out the window, then quickly extinguishes the light. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium shot. John McLean, lowering the rifle from his shoulder and staring toward the blacked-out window. Overseen, the shrill blast of a police whistle causes him to turn and run out of scene. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium long shot. With McLean car in foreground, moving away from camera at high speed. Suddenly, two sets of headlights appear in the distance, coming toward car with the sound of sirens overseen. The McLean car screeches to a stop, is quickly backed and turned around, and comes racing toward camera, with the headlights of the two pursuing cars closing rapidly, and the sound of the sirens building. The McLean car swerves past camera at high speed, followed by the two pursuing cars with sirens, and there's a loud crash off-scene. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, full shot. Side of road with McLean car turned over in a ditch, and a command car in a position relative to it, indicating that it ran the McLean car off the road. 4 guards emerge from the command car and 2 others from the second car and surround the wrecked McLean car. Some of the guards carry carbines, others drawn pistols. Exterior, oxygen plant, night, medium close shot. The McLean car. The McLeans are dazed from the impact. As they start to resist, the soldiers imprison their arms and lead them from the wrecked car. Quick dissolve to exterior, rocket station, night, full shot. The silhouette of a gigantic rocket is in background. In foreground, Ralph Pulitzer and Chief Barrows, carrying heavy suitcases, are sneaking around a high steel-link barbed wire top fence. Suddenly, a searchlight pans across scene and comes to rest on them. They straighten up, shade their eyes with their hands from the glare, and run away from camera. Exterior, rocket station fence, night, medium shot. Soldiers standing by fence. He raises his carbine to his shoulder. Soldier, shouting, "Halt!" Another soldier runs into scene. Second soldier. There they go. Exterior, rocket station, night, reverse angle. Of Pulsar and Barrows running with the suitcases and the searchlight following them. First soldier, off scene, shouting, "Halt!" Exterior, rocket station fence, night, medium shot. Two soldiers raising their carbines and firing several shots at rapid fire. Suddenly, there is a terrific explosion, and the scene is lighted by the flash of the explosion. The soldiers stagger back with the force wave. First soldier. What was that? Second soldier. Those suitcases must have been full of nitroglycerine. First soldier. Good thing we got them before they got to the rocket. Dissolve 2. Interior, Blake's office, day, medium shot. David, Fielding, and Cricket are sitting. Pat enters from laboratory. Pat. Colonel Fielding, would you step in here, please? Interior, Blake's office, day, medium shot. Fielding exits into laboratory, leaving David and the dog waiting. Fielding. I'll only be a minute, David. Interior, Dr. Blake's laboratory, day, medium shot. With shelf-bearing test tubes, retorts, and equipment in background. Doctors Blake and Metzler enter scene, wearing operating caps and gowns. Blake crosses to a table and places a covered tray on it. Blake, introducing the two men. Colonel Fielding, Dr. Metzler. Both men murmur, "How do you do?" Fielding looks at Blake questioningly. Dr. Metzler has completed the autopsy on the little Wilson girl. Metzler. I have, and my findings are almost unbelievable. That child died of a subdural hematoma, all right, but this caused it. Everyone crowds around the desk. Metzler picks up a small hexagonal crystal, about a half-inch long with the diameter of a pencil. Attached to one end is a thin platinum disc, and two small wires run from this to a ruptured platinum globe the size of a small marble. Metzler continued, I found this device inserted in the base of the skull, and the hemorrhage was caused when this little detonator, points to ruptured globe, exploded in her brain. Fielding. Incredible. Metzler. This crystal was in direct contact with the medulla oblongata. Blake. Do you suppose that's how they controlled Kathy Wilson and impelled her to set fire to her house? Metzler. Very possible. We've done something similar with white mice, and have made them follow directional impulses with high-frequency oscillation. Pat. But why did the thing explode? Blake. Probably their method of getting rid of people when they have no further use for them. Pat. Then David's father and mother. Blake looks at her meaningly and shrugs his shoulders. Interior, Blake's office, day, medium shot. The phone rings. David crosses and answers it. Hello? Yes, sir. Just a moment. I'll call him. He crosses to laboratory door and knocks. Door opens and Fielding, Blake, and Pat enter Blake's office. David. It's for you, Colonel Fielding. Fielding. Thank you, David. He crosses and takes the telephone. Fielding. Fielding. Oh, hello, Moody. Fine. Bring it to the intersection of State Highway 86 and Belmead Road, with an operator. Right. He hangs up phone and crosses, speaking to Blake. Fielding to Blake. Well, we finally got an earth auger. David. Is that for boring into the trapdoors? Fielding. That's what we expect to do, David. David. Gosh, how soon do we start? Fielding, kindly. Well, I was planning on having you wait here. David, jumping up and crossing to Fielding. But, I'm the one that discovered this whole thing, and, gee, I ought to be there. Gee. Fielding. Well, all right, but you'll have to follow orders, like any other soldier. David. Oh, I will, sir. Fielding. You'd better leave your dog here, David. He might get hurt out there. David. All right, sir. Dissolve 2. Exterior, McLean's Field, day, full shot. A platoon of soldiers are gathered around a Sherman tank, a truck, 2 jeeps, and an earth auger. Blake, Pat, David, and Fielding, in combat uniform, are in a group near the machines. David. Is that the earth auger? Exterior, McLean Field, day, David's angle, medium shot. Motorized earth auger, such as are used to dig cesspools on trailer. Fielding, off scene. Yes. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Lieutenant Blair and Lieutenant Cole enter scene. Fielding. All right, Cole. These people, or whatever they are, react to sound or vibrations. Send Kelly over to the northeast corner, he points, of the field. Cole. Yes, sir. Fielding. Full drums of live ammunition for your 505, and better carry 10 rounds of HE for the 175. Now, get this. This is important. Tell Kelly to take out 20 mils grenades. Tell him to traverse the northern border of the field and to throw the grenades out at short intervals. Got that? Yes, sir. That's to cover the sound of the earth auger. After that, have Kelly run the tank up and down that corner of the field and create a disturbance. Looking at his watch. He will proceed at 15:33 on a very flare from this position. Yes, sir. He leaves. Fielding, turning to Blair. Blair, you have your crew stand by with the earth auger. On a hand signal from me, proceed to that spot by those 3 stones. Go 6 feet north of them and drill a hole until you have penetrated a subterranean passage. Blair. Yes, sir. Fielding. As soon as you effect an entrance, take 2 squads and your demolition team with full attack equipment and stand by for me. Looking at watch. You've got 9 minutes. Blair, saluting and exiting. Yes, sir. Exterior, McLean Field, day, full shot. Blake, Fielding, and Pat are in a group. David is standing about 10 feet apart from them, watching the earth auger. A white uniformed intern enters the scene and crosses to Blake. Intern, in a low voice. The boy's father and mother and the others have been brought in. Dr. Metzler is preparing to operate. Blake. Good. Intern. His aunt has arrived too. She's very disturbed and wants him back at the hospital immediately. Blake, turning to Pat. Pat, why don't you take David back to the hospital? Fielding, to Pat. You can take my car. Sergeant Roberts will drive you. Pat. Thank you. Calling. Oh, David. David turns around and walks up to the group. Pat, continuing. David, we have to go back to the hospital. Your aunt's waiting to see you. David, disappointed. Aw, gee, what for? Fielding. Soldiers don't question orders, David. David. But... Fielding. An order is an order, young man. David, straightening up militarily. Okay, sir. Pat moves off scene, followed by David. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. David straggles some 15 or 20 feet behind Pat, looking reluctantly over his shoulder. Exterior, McLean Field, day, close shot. As David traverses a clump of bushes, looking back. A round section of earth opens just ahead to the left of him. Exterior, McLean Field, day, close shot. Pat, who looks over her shoulder, sees it and stops. Pat, yelling, David! Exterior, McLean Field, day, close shot. Top half of David as he stops. David, calling, "What?" Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Pat, as she screams and runs toward camera. Pat, "Look out, David!" Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium long shot. Dr. Blake reacting to what he sees. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium long shot. Reverse shot from Blake's angle as he sees a flap of earth is closing over David's and Pat's screams. Medium shot, Blake and Fielding. Blake excitedly, "They got them, Pat and the boy," pointing, "over there." He starts to run toward the spot where David and Pat disappeared. Fielding, running after him and stopping him. "Hold it, Blake, there's nothing you can do now." Blake rages impotently. Interior, tunnel, day, low-key, close shot. Pat's face as she looks up and reacts with a terrified scream, shrinking back. Interior, tunnel, day, low-key, medium close shot. Reverse, Pat's angle. Two mutants stand over her looking down. The lighting of the tunnel scenes seems to come from a luminous quality in the walls of the tunnels themselves. These tunnels are cut through the earth by an atomic heat ray, which blasts a hole through the earth and fuses the silica along the walls of the tunnel into a radioactive, phosphorescent, glassy-like substance. For these shots, we will use water glass sprayed on cellophane and backlight it with hot arcs. These creatures are mutations developed by the Martians for physical labor. They are humanoid in appearance, but are covered with a coarse black hair. Flocked baggy tights. Their feet are about twice the length of human feet, and the 4 toes of each foot terminate in heavy black digging claws. The fingers are much longer than human fingers, and are equipped with black, non-retractable digging claws. A hairless, snout-like nose, similar to a mole's, protrudes from the front of the face. They are with ears, and beady-like reflecting eyes look out from the hairy mask of the face. At no time do they utter any sound, for these creatures are telepathic. One of the mutants leans forward into camera with extended long prehensile fingers. Interior tunnel, day, medium close shot. Pat, as she cowers back and the long black fingers curl around her wrist. Pat screams and struggles frantically, and another long black hand comes into scene and grasps the other wrist. Medium shot. David is lying unconscious from his fall, momentarily ignored by the mutants. A mutant grabs at Pat's shoulders. Pat struggles frantically. Her screams revert to hoarse gasps of effort and terror, and in the struggle her dress is ripped. The long fingers of a hand curl around Pat's neck and squeeze for a moment. She suddenly relaxes into unconsciousness. One of the 2 mutants picks her up, the other picks up David. They lope away with them down the tunnel into infinity and darkness. Interior, tunnel, day, long shot. The 2 mutants lope past camera, carrying the 2 inert figures. They disappear around a corner of the tunnel. Medium shot. Mutants rounding another turn, carrying Pat and David at a loping run. Quick dissolve to interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. From an open metal trapdoor in background, there emanates a stronger light. The 2 mutants pass camera and lope toward metal door. They enter. Interior, central area of spaceship, day, full shot. It is a circular room some 20 feet in diameter, approximately 15 feet high. It is composed of a shiny metallic substance similar to polished aluminum. The only rivets in evidence mark the outline of bulkheads spaced around the perimeter of the walls. Upper left, near the spiral steel staircase, a low metal table is near the wall. It is flanked by 2 stationary metal benches. The room is dome-like in structure, and an area 12 feet in diameter and approximately 8 feet in height occupies the apex of the dome, which is of a transparent plastic substance. This is the control tower of the spaceship. A bank of control panels is placed in this structure, and a round cushioned pilot seat is suspended on a crosswalk of perforated metal girders. The room is illuminated by a series of circular lights which look like portholes. Even so, the lighting is in comparative low key. The two mutants descend the spiral staircase and bring Pat and David to the center of the room and lay their unconscious bodies on the floor. Then they step back approximately 5 feet and assume a rigid attitude grotesquely reminiscent of soldiers. Interior, spaceship, day, low-key, different angle. A bulkhead opens in the upstage wall. Sergeant Bellardi enters, walking like an automaton. He walks up to Pat, facing upstage. Then a mutant backs out of the bulkhead carrying a Martian seated on a circular metal tray, which is surmounted by a plastic bell jar. Another mutant enters, supporting the other handles of the metal tray. A mutant steps forward quickly and places a circular metal drum approximately 3 feet in diameter and 30 inches in height in front of Pat. The other two mutants then place the Martian on the drum and step back and assume an attitude of attention. Truck in to close shot. The Martian. He is approximately 30 inches in height, dressed in a singlet that resembles soft chainmail. Over this is a gorget of soft black material similar to velvet. He is seated, tailor fashion, on a circular cushion resembling sponge rubber. He is extremely brontocephalic, and his tremendously large skull is completely devoid of hair. His eyes are small and deep-set, and peer from their dark sockets with a strange ophidian luster. He is entirely covered by the plastic bell jar, and sits so frozen and unmoving that he appears to be a wax figure, until we are suddenly aware of the eyes moving to the right, then to the left, then down, where he focuses upon Pat. Interior, spaceship, day, medium close shot. Pat is unconscious on the floor. She stirs into consciousness, sits up, then stands, facing the camera. Her eyes widen and stare straight ahead. Interior, spaceship, day, close shot. Martian's eyes staring into camera. Close shot. Pat is drawn by the hypnotic stare of the Martian. She fights it off. Interior, spaceship, day, medium shot. Martian, Bellardi, and Pat. David is still unconscious on the floor. Bellardi stands stiffly. Bellardi, mechanically. What is your name? Pat, in a strained hoarse voice. Patricia Collins. Bellardi, indicating the Martian. He is from the 4th planet, which you call Mars. He wants to know what they plan to do, those people up above. Pat. I don't know. Bellardi. Yes, you do, and you will answer in a few moments. He gestures to the mutants. Interior, spaceship, day, medium shot. As two mutants approach Pat and suddenly grab her arms. She attempts to struggle, but is held in a vice-like grip. She turns suddenly and stares, her eyes widen further with horror. A panel on a bulkhead swings open, and a mutant pushes a chromium-wheeled operating table into scene. A tray of surgical instruments is on the table. Medium shot. The surgeon mutant lifts a hypodermic needle and advances toward Pat. She screams piercingly and hysterically and continues to scream. Interior, spaceship, day, close shot. Surgeon mutant, as he lifts the hypodermic needle of a strange design. His hands, holding the needle, move out of camera, and Pat's scream stops suddenly. Medium shot, as the two mutants lift Pat's unconscious body and place it on the operating table. David slowly regains consciousness and sits up, rubbing his eyes in a dazed manner. New angle, medium shot. David, as his eyes become adjusted to the light, and he reacts in terror at seeing Pat being placed upon the operating table. David starts to his feet, screaming, "No! No!" A mutant grabs him and clamps a long black hand across his mouth. Close shot. David's face, with the hand across his mouth, his eyes staring in horror. Medium shot. David's angle of the mutant surgeon as he takes up a complex surgical instrument. In his other hand, he lifts up and examines a tiny crystal capsule to which is affixed a small spiral wire. Turning slowly, he moves toward the unconscious form of Pat on the operating table. Close shot, back of Pat's neck and crown of her head. The mutant surgeon's hands come in and part the hair just above the nape of the neck. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. With truck in background, Fielding, Blake stand in foreground, looking toward the field. Just to the left of Fielding, a soldier stands with a signal pistol held ready. Fielding is watching the sweep hand on his wristwatch. He turns to the soldier. Fielding, "Fire!" The soldier fires a star shell. Exterior, McLean Field, day, long shot. Star shell exploding over pasture. Long shot. Sherman tank, starting and moving alongside the field. A hand grenade is thrown from the open hatch, rolls toward camera, comes to rest on the plowed field, and explodes. Interior, spaceship, day, medium shot. Martian in bell jar. The Martian's head turns sharply as a dull explosion is heard over scene. The lights go up in the spaceship. New angle. As the surgeon mutant removes a strange, complex helmet affair from Pat's head, while two other mutants rush forward and carry the Martian quickly through the bulkhead, closing the bulkhead behind them. The other mutants race across the room and up the spiral steel staircase, leaving Sergeant Bellardi staring after them. Pat lies unconscious on the operating table. David rushes over to Pat. Interior, tunnel, day, full shot. Just outside trapdoor. As the last mutant enters the tunnel through the trapdoor, two other mutants emerge from a side tunnel carrying a machine mounted on a metal, stretcher-like base. The machine resembles a large searchlight with a metal megaphone-shaped device fastened to the front of the lens. Two heavy insulators stand vertically just behind the searchlight part of the machine, and they are connected to a thing that looks like a small condenser by 2 or 3 inch copper ribbons. Off-scene can be heard the thumping rumble of the tank, treads, and a dull sound of exploding grenades. The two mutants with the machine run down the tunnel out of scene, leaving one mutant standing guard. Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. As the mutants run past camera with the machine and turn right through an intersecting tunnel. Medium shot. As the mutants place machine on floor of tunnel and deflect it upward at an angle of 45 degrees. Off-scene, the sound of the Sherman tank is much louder. Also, the sound of bursting grenades. New angle, as mutants push a stud on the machine, and a brilliant rush of flame emerges from the mouth of the megaphone-shaped nozzle. Long shot, roof of tunnel, as the flame from the atomic disintegrator burns a circular hole. The edges of the hole drip with molten silica, like wax under the flame of a blowtorch. Production note: for the full-scale shots, this effect can be obtained with a military flamethrower burning away a wax-covered flimsy. Lysopodium is jetted into flame with compressed air. Exterior, field, day, medium shot, miniature. As the shaft of brilliant white flame comes up out of the earth and engulfs the Sherman tank. Exterior, field, day, close shot. Soldier in open hatchway of tank engulfed in flames. Exterior, McLean field, day, medium close shot, miniature. Tank treads and forepart of tank, as it melts into a shapeless, molten mass. Exterior, McLean field, day, full shot. Earth auger, being removed from the circular 4-foot hold in field. Soldiers with submachine guns and miners' lamps attached to their helmets stand by. Lieutenant Blair and his demolition team are carrying their C2 packs strapped across their shoulders. Fielding runs into scene carrying a submachine gun. Fielding crosses to the hole and drops down into it and is instantly followed by the men. As the last of them enter the hole, Blake runs into scene and drops into a hole after them. Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. As Fielding and the soldiers, followed by Blake, run past camera. Interior, tunnel, day, new angle. As the party approaches a branch tunnel. 2 soldiers are delegated to explore it, while the main party, including Lieutenant Blair's demolition team, proceeds. Fielding turns and suddenly recognizes Blake. Fielding: "What are you doing down here?" Blake: "I'm going to find Pat." Fielding: "Well, come on." Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. Fielding, Blake, and soldiers cautiously round turn and come toward camera. Long shot. The soldiers in foreground. Their miners' lamps light the tunnel, at the far end of which the mutant standing guard by the trapdoor spreads his legs and arms and waits. Medium close shot. As the rescue party stops. Soldier: "What in the name of time is that?" Fielding: "I don't know. Fire on command." 2 of the soldiers drop to their knees and aim their guns at Lenz. The other 4 and Fielding raise their guns and aim at the lens. Medium close shot. Mutant, who starts lumbering forward toward group. Reverse shot. Rescue party, with all Tommy guns aimed at Lenz. Fielding: "Fire!" 7 Tommy guns fire a short burst directly at Lenz. Medium close shot. Mutant as he is blown over backwards. Long shot. Rescue party running through tunnel toward camera. They step over the body of the dead mutant. Interior, spaceship, day, full shot. As rescue party runs down spiral staircase. Interior, spaceship, day, medium shot. As Sergeant Bellardi looks toward ladder and aims his .45. David grabs his arm and spoils his aim. Interior, spaceship, day, medium shot. As a soldier leaps off the top of the spiral staircase and knocks Bellardi to the floor. Bellardi's pistol falls to the floor. David picks up the pistol. Interior, spaceship, day, full shot. As Bellardi fights furiously with his fists. A soldier knocks him out with the butt of his gun. Soldier to Fielding: "Hey, what's the matter with this guy?" Fielding: "He doesn't know what he's doing. Take him outside." The soldiers exit with Bellardi. Fielding turns to David. Fielding continued: "You go with them, son." David exits. Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. At door of spaceship. David comes up the ladder and looks up the tunnel where the 2 soldiers and Bellardi have disappeared. He runs after them. Interior, spaceship, day, medium shot. As Blake and Fielding run up to Pat, who is still unconscious. Blake. Pat! Pat! He shakes her, but she does not regain consciousness. Blake picks her up and carries her up the spiral ladder. Interior, tunnel intersection, day, medium shot. David runs toward camera and pauses uncertainly at the intersection. He doesn't know which tunnel to take. He finally chooses the right-hand tunnel and runs out of scene. Interior, spaceship, day, full shot. Fielding, Blair, and his demolition team stare around the spaceship. Fielding crosses and attempts to open one of the bulkheads. Fielding. I hate to destroy this ship, but we can't afford to take any chances. Go ahead and place your C2 charges, Lieutenant. Blair signals one of the men, who removes his demolition pack and places it near the bulkhead. He pulls back the canvas cover, exposing a clock time fuse. The other demolition expert is setting his charge at the opposite end of the ship. Blair to Fielding. What interval shall I set it to fire, sir? Fielding. 6 minutes will give us enough time. Interior, spaceship, day, close shot. Demolition expert sets dial to 6 minutes and pulls firing pin. Interior, tunnel at intersection, day, medium shot. As 2 soldiers run into scene from branch tunnel. They stop just around the corner of the tunnel, and each takes a Mills grenade from his bag and pulls the pin with his teeth and drops down into position to hurl the grenade into the tunnel. Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. The 2 mutants with the atomic disintegrator are pursuing the soldiers. At intersection, medium shot. 2 soldiers as they wait to throw grenades. First soldier. Here they come. Both of them hurl their grenades down the branch tunnel and flatten back against the wall. Interior, tunnel, day, long shot. As the grenades explode and roof of tunnel caves in and falls in front of mutants, filling the tunnel with earth. Interior, tunnel, from behind mutants, day, medium shot. As they place the atomic disintegrator on floor of tunnel and direct it toward the piled up debris. One of them presses a stud and a bright sheet of flame burns through the debris. Interior, tunnel at intersection, day, medium shot. As the flame burns through. First soldier. Let them have it again. They throw 2 more grenades, which explode, blocking the tunnel again. First soldier. Hurry, tell everybody to get out of here. I'll try and hold them off. The second soldier turns and runs out of scene and up the main tunnel to the right. The first soldier hurls another grenade, which explodes, dropping the roof of the tunnel and blocking it again. Interior, another section of tunnel, day, medium shot. As second soldier encounters the 2 soldiers bearing the unconscious form of Sergeant Bellardi. Second soldier. Pass the word. We gotta get out of here right away. A sergeant takes a whistle from his pocket and blows 3 sharp blasts, then repeats it. Interior, different section of tunnel, day, medium shot. As another soldier hears the whistle signal in the distance and repeats it on his whistle. Interior, spaceship, day, full shot. As Fielding, Blair, and demolition team react to the whistle signal and run to the spiral staircase. Exterior, McLean Field, day, medium shot. As Blake emerges from the trapdoor, carrying Pat with him. A soldier standing at the top of the trapdoor hears the whistle signal in the distance. Soldier. That's emergency retreat. Get her out of here on the double. Blake moves quickly out of scene, carrying Pat with him. Interior, tunnel intersection, day, medium shot. Soldier at branch tunnel, as a burst of flame cuts through the debris some distance up branch tunnel. As flame breaks off, he quickly hurls another grenade, which explodes down the tunnel, again dropping the roof. 2 soldiers running halt by the branch tunnel. First soldier, better stand by with grenades and help me hold these monkeys off. Third soldier, what's up? First soldier, they've got some kind of a flamethrower that cuts right through rocks and dirt. Watch it, here they come again. A blast of flame billows out of the tunnel, then blacks out, and the first soldier throws another grenade. The other soldiers also throw grenades against the collapsing roof of the tunnel. At this point, Lieutenant Blair, his men, and Fielding enter the scene. Fielding, all right, keep going. On the double, keep moving, you two. The 2 soldiers run out of scene, followed by Fielding. Blair signals one of the demolition men to remain and place a charge. The others exit quickly. The demolition man who was left behind starts to set the fuse. Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. David hurries along the tunnel, approaches another intersection. He hears the whistle faintly in the distance and stops. He is again faced with the decision of which tunnel to choose, and is becoming panic-stricken. Interior, tunnel, intersection, day, close shot. David. The sweat stands out on his forehead as he tries to peer into the tunnel ahead of him. He starts to turn into the right-hand tunnel when he hears faint footsteps approaching. He is about to call when some instinct prompts him to press back against the tunnel wall. Interior, tunnel intersection, day, medium shot. A mutant is cautiously making his way down the tunnel. He pauses and looks back at the direction from which he came. He advances a few more feet and reaches the intersection, where he stops. Close shot. David is pressing himself as far into the corner of the opposite tunnel wall as he can. He is terrified. As he presses closer to the wall, he dislodges a tiny pebble, which rolls down the wall onto the floor of the tunnel. Medium shot. The mutant hears the sound of the pebble falling and looks around. He starts to advance toward where David is standing when a whistle is heard faintly in the distance. He quickly turns and lopes off into darkness. Medium long shot. David waits until the mutant disappears and then runs up the opposite tunnel. Interior, different tunnel intersection, day, medium shot. The demolition man who set the last C2 charge is hurrying along, endeavoring to catch up with Blair and the other men. He reaches the intersection and bumps squarely into the mutant who is loping up from the other tunnel. The mutant envelops the soldier in his huge arms and starts to bend him backwards. The soldier vainly struggles for his pistol, but is like a child in the mutant's hands. He screams, but the mutant covers his mouth with a hairy paw. Soldier, gasping, "Help! Help!" Interior, tunnel, day, medium long shot. Blair and the rest of the demolition team hear the faint screams behind them and turn back. Interior, tunnel intersection, day, medium shot. The soldier is struggling, but growing weaker, as the mutant has him bent over nearly double. Blair and his men round the corner and charge for the mutant, who drops the soldier. As the mutant leaps forward, he is met by a hail of Tommy gun slugs, and drops in his tracks. The men pick up the injured soldier and run back up the tunnel. Interior, tunnel, different intersection, day, long shot, as several soldiers and Fielding run past camera. First soldier, looking over shoulder. There they are again. Interior, tunnel, day, reverse long shot, his angle. Mutants, entering main tunnel with machine. Fielding's voice, off scene. All right, rest of you keep moving. You, Sims, and Watson, give 'em a long burst. Medium shot. Fielding, first and third soldier, firing their Tommy guns toward Lens, as they back around a curve in the tunnel. Medium shot. From behind Fielding, first and third soldiers as they back around a 90-degree turn and a blast of flame strikes the wall just in front of them. Fielding and the two soldiers back away from the searing heat, shielding their faces with their arms. Fielding. Come on, out of here on the double. They turn and run down tunnel and out of scene. Interior, intersection tunnel, day, medium, long shot. Blair and his demolition team enter. The men carrying the injured soldier continue on. Blair looks around and signals one of the demolition men to place a C2 charge at the intersection of the tunnels. Blair looks at his wristwatch. Blair. 3 minutes. The soldier sets the time fuse, pulls the pin, and they all exit quickly. Interior, intersection, tunnel, day, medium shot. Fielding and two soldiers run past intersection and continue on. Huddled in a dark corner, we see the two mutants holding the Martian on his tray. One of the mutants is also carrying a strange-looking antenna device. They turn and disappear into the darkness. Interior, tunnel, day, medium shot. David runs toward camera. It pans with him as he comes to a dead end, which slopes steeply up. He stops and looks about him uncertainly. Interior, tunnel, different intersection, day, medium close shot. C2 demolition charge. We hear the sound of the time clock ticking away. Insert. Face of C2 demolition time clock. The second hand is slowly moving around. The minute hand reads 2 minutes. Interior, tunnel, dead end, day, medium close shot. David climbs to the top of the slope at the dead end of the tunnel and peers up at the roof. Close shot of tunnel roof. The faint outline of what could be a mutant trapdoor is barely visible in the half light. Medium shot. David stands on his tiptoes and strives to reach the trapdoor, but can't quite touch it. He frantically sets to work digging at the fused earthen wall, trying to carve a foothold. His fingers make little impression on the hard surface. Seeking something to use as a digging instrument, he feels his belt buckle. He tears off the belt and again starts to dig. From overhead, we hear distant sounds of moving vehicles. Exterior, McLean Field, day, full shot. Trapdoor through which the rescue party entered. Two soldiers are on their hands and knees, lifting the others out of the hole as swiftly as possible. Bellardi and Pat are already in a waiting jeep, which rolls away out of scene. The mechanized earth auger is rapidly moving out of scene. Another jeep races into scene as the injured soldier is lifted through the hole, and all the soldiers and Fielding jump aboard the jeep, which moves out of scene. Exterior, McLean Field, long shot. Jeeps and earth auger, hightailing it across pasture as a burst of flame shoots high into the air through the hole from whence the rescue party just emerged. Dissolve 2. Exterior corner of McLean's Field, day, medium shot. Some distance from the trapdoor, the two jeeps have stopped by the ambulance. Fielding helps 5 or 6 soldiers remove Bellardi from the jeep. He fights furiously. A soldier and Blake are lifting the unconscious form of Pat from the jeep. Blake. Hurry, let's get them to the hospital. He gestures toward the soldier who was injured in the fight with the mutant. Give him first aid. I'll send the ambulance right back. The driver runs to the back of the ambulance, opens it, takes out 2 stretchers and restraining bands. Pat, still unconscious, is placed on one stretcher. Bellardi is placed on the other and strapped down with the restraining bands. Blake and the driver enter the ambulance, and it pulls out of the scene at high speed. Siren wailing. Exterior, corner, McLean Field, day, medium shot. Fielding suddenly turns to Lieutenant Cole. Fielding, with concern. Where's David? Cole. I don't know, Colonel. Wasn't he with Lieutenant Blair? Fielding, to Blair, worried. Lieutenant, have you seen David? Blair. Why, no. Didn't he come out of the tunnel with you? Fielding. No, I sent him up long ago. If he didn't come out with you, he must still be down there. He is frantic. How much time before the demolitions go off? Blair, looking at his watch. 1 minute, sir. Fielding makes a move for the jeep. Blair puts his hand on Fielding's shoulder, stopping him. Blair. You'll never make it, sir. Fielding and Blake look at each other in hopeless despair. Interior, tunnel, dead end, day, medium shot. David is desperately digging at the wall of the tunnel. He has clawed away enough earth and rock to almost touch the trapdoor. He stops to rest, wipes the sweat from his eyes, and again attacks the tunnel wall with his belt buckle. Interior, tunnel, intersection, day. Insert time clock face. It reads 40 seconds. Interior, tunnel, dead end, day, medium close shot. David is frantic. He is within inches of the trapdoor and still digging. Interior, tunnel intersection, insert time clock face. It reads 20 seconds. Interior, tunnel, dead end, day, medium shot. David has reached the tunnel roof and is pushing on the trapdoor. It slowly rises and the daylight streams into his face as he clambers out. Exterior, corner McLean Field, day, long shot. Shooting over the backs of Fielding, Blair, and Cole toward the center of the field. David is seen climbing out of the trapdoor. Fielding jumps into the jeep, yells at the driver. The jeep roars toward David. Exterior, field, day, at trapdoor. The jeep tears into the scene. Fielding reaches out and lifts David into the jeep. Without stopping, it roars out of scene. Exterior, McLean Field, day, long shot. The jeep, with Fielding and David, speeds towards camera. The other soldiers are taking refuge behind the cars and equipment, awaiting the explosion. Suddenly, there's a violent detonation and a cloud of earth and debris mushrooms into the sky. Exterior, rocky ridge overlooking McLean Field, day, long shot. In the distant background, we see the general activity after the explosion. Men are picking themselves up from the ground, brushing themselves off, looking back at the crater caused by the explosion. In the immediate foreground, a trapdoor opens in the ground, and we see the hairy arm of a mutant come into scene. The rest of his body appears in deep silhouette. He is followed by the second mutant, who is carrying the antenna device. Fade out. Fade in. Exterior, McLean Field, dusk, full shot. Fielding and Lieutenant Cole are in foreground at rim of crater, caused by the explosion. They are inspecting a battered portion of the spaceship's instrument panel. Lieutenant Blair enters scene carrying intricate-looking instrument, similar to an altimeter. He hands it to Colonel Fielding. Blair. This instrument seems to be intact, sir. Fielding inspects the instrument and hands it to Cole. Fielding. It appears to be similar to our high-altitude aneroids. He then turns back to Blair. Did you finish checking the tunnels, Blair? Blair. Yes, sir. Our demolition charges cleaned them all out. Fielding. Be sure the boys bring in everything they find. They resume their inspection of the spaceship instrument panel. Exterior, McLean Field, dusk, medium shot. Shooting toward Rocky Ridge. David walks slowly up the hill. He stoops and picks up a small piece of metal, which he puts in his pocket. Exterior, McLean Field, Rocky Ridge, dusk, medium shot. Fielding, Cole, Blair, and several soldiers, 2 of whom have just placed some portions of the spaceship on the pile. A sergeant enters scene. Sergeant. Dr. Metzler just called from the hospital, sir. The operations were successful. Fielding. Thank you, Sergeant. He looks around. Fielding. I want to get back right away. Where's David? Blair, pointing. He was up there a couple of minutes ago, sir. He laughs. Looking for souvenirs. Fielding. Thanks, Lieutenant. You and your men did a fine job. You can report back to the base. Cole. Yes, sir. He leaves, and Fielding moves out of scene in the direction to which Blair had pointed. Medium long shot. David is walking aimlessly toward the mutants, whom we see in silhouette in the foreground. David stops and picks up a piece of metal. He examines it, throws it aside, and sees something closer to camera near where the mutants are hiding. As he starts for the object, we hear Fielding's voice off-scene. Fielding, off-scene. David! David turns, looks at him, then turns and looks at the object that he was interested in. David. There's something up here that might be... Fielding, interrupting. Never mind. They'll get all of that tomorrow. We've got to go back to the hospital now. David turns and runs back to Fielding. Dissolve 2. Interior, Dr. Blake's consultation room. Medium full shot. David and his aunt, Margaret McLean, a pleasant, forthright woman, are seated. They have an attitude of expectancy. Cricket is seated on the sofa next to Aunt Margaret. She is petting him. It is apparent from the dog's attitude that he knows her. David. They've been in there a long time, Aunt Margaret. Aunt Margaret. It only seems like a long time, dear. Trying to switch his thoughts. Has Cricket had his supper yet? David, disgusted. The nurse gave him some toast and spinach. Aunt Margaret. We'll give him some real food when we get home. Fielding and Blake enter. David jumps up. David, anxiously. Are they all right? Blake, kindly. Your father and mother are going to be just like they were before these things happened. When I talked to them, David, their only concern was for you. David, turning to his aunt. They didn't know what they were doing, did they, Aunt Margaret? Fielding. They weren't responsible for anything that happened, David. Now go home with your aunt and get a good night's sleep. You'll see them tomorrow morning. Aunt Margaret and David cross to the door. David. Yes, sir. Turns to the dog. Come on, Cricket. We're going home. They exit. Dissolve 2. Exterior, Rocky Ridge overlooking McLean Field. Night. Medium shot. 2 mutants and Martian, as one of them adjusts a series of rings like a miniature radio direction loop, then presses a stud, and violet sparks ripple and dance around the edges of the rings, and a shrill, high-frequency buzzing sound, broken up like very fast code, emanates from the machine. The 2 mutants and the Martian raise their eyes upward and stare into space. Then they look off stage. Exterior, McLean House, night. Mutants angle, long shot. The lights are burning in the McLean house. Interior, David's bedroom, night, full shot. David is in his pajamas. Cricket is on the foot of the bed, and Aunt Margaret is pulling back the covers. Aunt Margaret: "All right, young man, into bed with you." David, yawning: "Okay, Aunt Margaret." She ruffles his hair, kisses him, then crosses to the door, turns off the light, and pauses before she exits. Aunt Margaret: "Good night, dear." David, sleepily: "Good night." Aunt Margaret exits, closes the door after her. The camera pans to Cricket on the foot of the bed. His ears suddenly perk up, and he looks toward the window. He whimpers, then jumps off the bed and patters to the window. He puts his paws on the sill, looks out, and growls. David, sitting up in bed: "What's the matter, Cricket?" David jumps out of bed and crosses to the window. He looks out into the night. His eyes widen. He quickly removes the muslin cover from his telescope and puts his eye to the eyepiece. Exterior, McLean Field, night, telescope, matte shot. Of a ball of white fire rapidly descending. Telescope matte shot pans, and the ball of white fire descends upon the ridge and dies to a soft glow. Interior, David's room, night, close shot. David, as he makes quick adjustments of the ocular and again presses his eye to the telescope. Exterior, McLean Field, rocky ridge, night, telescope, matte. Of round bulkhead opening in section of spaceship seen through screen of heavy bushes and trees. The silhouette of the two mutants carrying the Martian in his plastic dome enters scene and goes through bulkhead, which closes behind them. Then the scene is burned out by a blinding white light. Exterior, McLean Field, night, telescope, matte shot. As the ball of white fire ascends swiftly and dies away in the distance. Interior, David's room, night, close shot. David, clutching Cricket against him and staring out the window. David: "Well, gee whiz!" Fade out. The end.